Hi guys, my name is Lauren and I run a little website called The Millennial Legacy. I started my website about 6 years ago with the intention of inspiring and empowering millennials to fight for a better future. I'm sure some of you are probably laughing after hearing that, but if you visit my website at www.themillenniallegacy, you will see why the millennial generation is indeed destined to change the United States and the world in a profoundly positive way. This is for real. I'm not making this up. So if you don't believe me, go check it out. So I'm going to make a pretty big declaration. I believe this video may be the most important video you will ever watch. I believe this because the message is extremely important. And I do hope that this video goes viral so that as many people as possible will hear this message. I just want to say that I'm not looking for fame. I'm just a simple woman who is hoping to make a positive difference in my country and in the world. That's all. So if what I say resonates with you, then please, please, please share this video. Now I do have a lot to say, so this video is going to be quite long, but please stick around to the very end because a lot of the best stuff I've saved for the end. And since I have a lot to say, I typed up a script of sorts so that I could make sure I covered everything. Therefore, I'll be looking down and reading quite a bit of it, and I apologize for that. But again, I just wanted to make sure that I covered everything. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the importance of voting and the immense value of political and civic participation. I'm also going to explain why millennials need to turn out to vote more than any other generation, and why our generation needs to take advantage of the incredible opportunity we have to change our country and the world in a drastic way. This upcoming election that is now less than 2 months away is probably one of the most important in our nation's history. And because of how interconnected our world is today, this election could also be one of the most important in all of world history. But we shouldn't just care about voting this November. We need to remember how important it is that we always vote and that we are informed voters and active participants in our democracy. How many of you believe that your vote doesn't count, or that Washington will never change, or that all politicians are the same? Raise your hands. I know that's how a lot of you feel. You're disenchanted and fed up with the bullshit, and I completely understand your frustration. However, what if I told you that we, the people, are actually to blame for the demise of our democracy? Yes, you heard me right. As tempting as it is to blame incompetent and selfish politicians and the greedy elite who buy them, the main reason why our nation is in so much trouble right now is because the people have forgotten how important we are to the strength and vitality of our beloved republic. So now that I've gotten your attention, let me explain. First of all, your vote does matter. Every vote matters because every vote counts. For example, if one person donates $5 to a charity, that doesn't really make much of a difference. But if 1 million people donate $5 to a charity, that charity now has $5 million, and that makes a huge difference. So you see, you can't just look at voting as your individual vote. You are voting with millions of other Americans, and it's our collective votes that make a difference. And I understand that the Electoral College is what really decides the winner, or ultimately decides the winner in the presidential election. But that's only for the presidential election. That has no bearing on the senatorial elections or in the House of Representatives. And the Electoral College goes with the popular vote of the state. So ultimately, it's the people that really matter. The most important thing to remember is that the more votes cast, the bigger the influence we, the people, have during the election. Election day is the one day when all the power goes back to the people because we decide who the next class of leaders will be. But there are cases where just a few votes will decide the winner. Many of you millennials may be too young to remember this, but in the 2000 general election, hanging Chad became a household term as Florida's votes were counted and recounted while the country waited for several weeks to find out who our next president would be. They didn't recount the Electoral College votes, they counted the people's votes. So that just further proves that it's the people's votes that matter. So yes, your vote absolutely does count, especially in conjunction with millions of other voters. And you know what? If more people had voted in Florida, maybe it wouldn't have been so close and it wouldn't have been the mess that it ended up being. And I know that many of you are middle of the road, on the fence voters who are turned off by the partisan gridlock in Congress. and the two not so desirable presidential candidates that we have. I get it. I'm sick of it too. But a study by the Pew Research Center found that the most likely voters are also the most extreme ideologically, which means that they are helping to drive the partisanship in Congress. You see, since they are the ones who are voting, politicians are responding to them. Why would politicians care about people who don't vote? Those people don't threaten their jobs. But if the people who are most conservative, most liberal are voting in higher numbers than everyone else, the politicians will court those extreme voters and their extreme views. So if you want a less partisan Congress, get out and make your voices heard on election day. Secondly, I agree that most candidates are fairly incompetent and oftentimes quite worthless. And it's hard to get jazzed about voting when none of the candidates are any good. Let me just go off script for a second here. I understand that many people feel that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are equally as bad. But that's like saying that walking pneumonia and stage 4 cancer are equally as bad. Okay, that just simply isn't true. Anyways, getting back on point, part of the reason why politicians aren't any good is because we, the people, put up with their bullshit. Instead of holding them accountable and making our voices heard, whether at the ballot box or at town hall meetings or by calling, emailing, or writing to them, we sit around and bitch and complain to each other about how crooked and useless politicians are. If they are doing a shitty job while in office, we need to tell them they're doing a shitty job while in office. They are elected to represent us. We are their boss, not the other way around. And if we don't like what they are doing or how they are representing us, then come election day, we need to fire their good-for-nothing asses. But we don't. That is why there is a 90% incumbency rate in Congress right now. Congress has an approval rating of about 20%, which is actually the highest it's been in quite a while. But about 90% of them will be reelected in November. Why? Because not enough of us vote. It looks like we don't care because most of us don't care. These worthless politicians are going to keep doing a shitty job unless we make them change. And I'll have more on that in a moment. Third of all, I agree that money does rule politics. But again, that is because we let it. Lobbyists, special interests, and billionaires freely buy political leaders and with their money. But do you know what is more valuable to a candidate than money? Votes. That's right, my friends. People don't get into office because they raise more money during the campaign. They get into office through votes. Politicians won't gain office or stay in office unless they get enough votes. But again, Americans don't vote in high numbers. So our lack of participation allows lobbyists and special interests to have more control in Washington than us. So if we want to take back control, we need to start voting in higher numbers. If only 40% of politician A's district votes, he isn't going to listen to his constituents more than, say, Big Pharma or the NRA, who just donated $50,000 to his campaign. But if 90% of his district votes, I would imagine said politician would be more likely to pay attention to his constituents because now there is a much greater chance that he will lose his job because more people are voting. Look, the fact of the matter is, in this country, the people rule, or they are supposed to. Because we have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We elect our leaders to office to represent us. And I know that most of our leadership in Washington right now is about as useful as an umbrella in a monsoon. But before we point fingers and accuse them of not doing their jobs, what about the job we are doing as citizens of a self-governing democracy? The thing is, in a democracy, the people have to participate. They have to vote. They have to be informed. And they have to be vocal about what they want and what they don't want. In the midterm elections, typically less than half the country votes. And that number doesn't increase much during the general election when it's about 55%. So when it comes to voting, we're not really doing that great of a job. It's actually abysmal and a total embarrassment. What about being well informed? How are we on that front? Well, it must be noted that our mass media is the worst at reporting real facts and real news. So it isn't entirely the fault of the American citizens that they are so misinformed. And it is also true that many Americans are painfully unaware of how our political system actually works. Again, that isn't entirely our fault. Instead of learning about civics and politics in school, we are learning about ancient Roman gods because, that's what's super important and relevant to our everyday lives. But it is also true that the American people don't really take the time to get the real facts, and they are out there. And most people don't really care enough to learn about our political system. It's pretty sad that a majority of the American population would fail our citizenship test. And one of the worst things we do is we allow our preconceived notions and opinions to keep us from accepting the truth. This is called cognitive dissonance. And it's when the facts contradict what we believe, we convince ourselves that the facts must be wrong because we are most definitely right. That is so incredibly harmful to our democracy. We, the people, absolutely must be well informed. And the only way we can do that is if we have open minds. Only then can we use facts to form our opinions instead of ignoring the facts when they contradict our uninformed opinions. Lastly, do we communicate with our political leaders enough? How many people actually write letters or emails to their representatives or call their offices when they're upset about something, or attend a town hall meeting, or directly go to their representative's office to talk to or lobby them about an issue? My point is, we need to let our representatives know that we are paying attention and that we care about the decisions they are making on our behalf. These things, they don't take a lot of time. It might take, a few minutes or a few hours of your time to devote to talking to your representatives and reaching out to them, but it's important that we do it. Look, my point is that we can't get mad at our political leadership for not doing their job when we don't do our job either. Okay, that's called hypocrisy. We can't be complacent bystanders in our democracy. We have to be active participants. As I stated at the beginning of this video, I'm sure most of you believe that things in Washington will never change. And things will never change unless we make them change. Because change sure as hell isn't going to come from the politicians. The way things are right now, with low voter participation and a very high incumbency rate, that greatly benefits them. Why do you think one political party is doing everything it can to pass laws making it harder for some demographics to vote? If votes really didn't matter, then why would these politicians bother trying so hard to disenfranchise certain voters? The politicians want things to stay exactly as they are. So if we want to see Washington change, we have to be the catalyst for that. We have to be the change. As Henry David Thoreau said, things do not change, we change. We can't just wish these changes into existence. We have to actually work for it. When a government is ruled by the people have to be involved. We aren't involved, at least nowhere near the level that we should be. And apathy is like kryptonite in a democracy. Progress can't be made when we are sitting on our hands, bitching and complaining about how bad things have gotten. If we want things to change, then we need to roll up our sleeves and get to work on making things better. We, the people, are in charge. We, the people, are what really make our country strong. In a healthy, thriving democracy, the people are well informed, they are active in their civic duties, and they assert their authority as the true rulers. Right now, we have the exact kind of democracy we deserve, a failing one. And government isn't the problem. Okay, it's the people in government that are the problem. Most of them are incompetent, they're uninformed, selfish, and greedy. And they generally aren't too concerned about the common welfare of the American people, which is a big problem because the federal government's primary job is to provide for the common welfare of the American people. If we had good people in government who really do take their job seriously, who are informed of the issues and base their opinions and policy-making decisions around facts, and who want to do what is best for their constituents and for the country, our government would function a lot better. Think of government as an engine. If the parts that make up this engine are old, rusty, and outdated, some of which hardly work, it won't run very well. But if you replace those parts with newer, fresher working ones, the engine will run much better. So if the government is the engine that runs this country, the people in government are the parts to that engine. And right now, most of them are old, outdated, and hardly work. That's the problem, y'all. And the same analogy can be applied to the American people. If the government is the engine, we the people are everything else that is needed to keep the car running. And if we don't do our job, then the engine can't do its job. And real quickly, I just want to take a moment to point out that right now, everyone is focusing on who is going to be our next president. But what I guess a lot of people don't quite realize is that there are more than 2 people running for political office in this election. The entire House of Representatives is up for re-election. That's 435 people. And 34 of the 100 Senate seats are also up for re-election. Those elections matter too. These are the people who represent your state and your district. And remember, the president doesn't make or pass laws. That is Congress's job. They're the policymakers. So when Donald Trump says that he alone can fix our nation's problems, no, he can't. The president doesn't have that kind of power. We have a balance of power in our government between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Our Constitution was written that way on purpose. So don't sit out this election because you don't like either presidential candidate. Remember, there are other people running for office as well. And here's the most important thing, my fellow millennials. Our representatives aren't going to pay attention to the issues that are important to us, the youth, unless we start voting more. Older people are voting at a much higher rate than people under 30. So do you want to guess why our government spends 4 times more money on seniors than it does on youth? Because older people vote, whereas the majority of young people skip the polls. Politicians have no reason to pay attention to the issues that are affecting young people or are important to young people because we don't threaten their jobs. But older people and all of their votes do threaten their jobs. Do you want your grandparents deciding how government money is spent and on what issues are most important? I certainly don't. So if we want to change that, we need to make our voices heard and get out and vote. Millennials will be the most dominant generation this century. And our generational legacy is entirely dependent on how we respond to the crisis we face right now. Our legacy isn't something we will think about when we are older and ready to pass the torch to the next generation. Our legacy has already begun. It is already being shaped by our actions and inactions. And yes, we are already affecting change in this country. Take same-sex marriage, for example. That would have never happened if millennials hadn't been pushing for it. We are the most socially progressive generation in history, and public opinion on this issue changed dramatically in a very short amount of time, right at the same time millennials were coming of age and were part of the electorate voting on this issue. Coincidence? I don't think so. And the same can be said about the legalization of marijuana in Colorado and Washington state, and recognizing how ineffective and damaging the war on drugs has been. You can also add to this list the passing of the Affordable Care Act, the intense focus on immigration reform and the outrageous cost of higher education, the push for action on discriminatory laws and institutions, and the rejuvenation of feminism. Of course, not everybody is happy with this. Older white men in particular are quite upset that their dominance is being threatened. But if we are to truly live in an equal and free society, then we need to change the status quo. Millennials clearly understand this, and we are already starting to push for change in a lot of these areas. And remember, change is never easy. And change on the level that is needed in this country will involve extreme transformation and even revolution of the political kind, like we saw with Bernie Sanders and his supporters. Every time change happens, one or more groups is unhappy with it because it means that their way of life or their way of thinking, which is the status quo, is on the way out. So these groups fight back tooth and nail, resisting the change. They spin stories and make things up in order to confuse and manipulate the public. And that is exactly what is happening right now. And we can't back down from this. The establishment in Washington wants us to believe that change isn't possible. We have to stop letting them control us. We have to understand that the only limitations we face are the ones we impose on ourselves. Change has to start with us first. We, the people, need to stop complaining and start acting. The United States is and has been for quite some time now a plutocracy, which, if you don't know, by definition is a government ruled by the wealthy. Politicians are bought by rich donors, lobbyists, and special interest groups who contribute to their campaigns. The common people are not represented in this system. So we need to take our power back. Because if we don't, the plutocrats will strengthen their control of our government. Again, we can't expect politicians in Washington to change because most of them represent the status quo. Let me try to explain this another way. So if you want to change things in your life, if you're not happy with your life and you want to change things, do you just wait for all the circumstances surrounding your life to just magically change themselves? Of course not, because that's just not how it works. You have to change your attitude, maybe even your values and your work ethic. The people are the heart and soul of our republic. So the change we seek has to come from within us. We can't rely on the politicians or Washington. It has to come from us. We also need to constantly remember that change takes time. Our country isn't going to do a 180 overnight. It took decades for us to get into this mess, so it's going to take decades for us to get out of it. And this is really important for our generation in particular to remember because we are just so used to instant gratification. But the massive amount of change that is needed is going to take a long time to implement. And it's going to also take a tremendous amount of hard work, dedication, and fortitude from us. And I know all of this seems unfair because we didn't create this mess. We are the unfortunate ones inheriting it. It's very true that our generation has been dealt a pretty shitty hand. But as Cheryl Strayed said, you don't have a right to the card you believe you should have been dealt. You have an obligation to play the hell out of the ones you're holding. She's absolutely right. We've got shitty cards, but we still have two choices. We can choose to fold right now and leave a legacy of apathy and destruction behind us, or we can go all in, baby. When I think about how bad things are, both here in the United States and abroad, I actually feel optimistic. We are in the midst of a crisis right now, but the only good thing about a crisis is that it provides an opportunity for radical and much needed change. JFK once said, when written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger, and the other represents opportunity. As I said at the beginning of this video, millennials have an incredible opportunity to change the country and the world in a very positive and enduring way. Only doubt and fear can stop us from doing so. If we have any doubt about our ability to be the change that is needed, then we won't succeed. Because as Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And if we have any fear about instituting change, then it will stop us from even trying. And we have to at least try. No matter how hard it gets, we cannot give up. If not for our future, then for our children's future and our grandchildren's future. Because right now, we hold their future in our hands. Don't you want to do everything you can to make sure they don't have to deal with the same bullshit that we're dealing with? We shouldn't doom them because we didn't want to work hard enough to solve the many problems we face. Because that's what our parents' generation is doing to us right now. I truly believe with every fiber of my being that our generation is capable of doing amazing things. I believe that we can take humanity to a more peaceful, sustainable, and prosperous level. There is nothing stopping us but our own fears and insecurities. When the American colonists decided that they wanted to gain independence from Great Britain, their chances of success were slim to none. Great Britain was the most powerful nation in the world at the time, and a bunch of ragtag colonists with little to no military experience, coupled with a makeshift Congress that was making decisions on the fly and begging other countries for money to fund their audacious campaign, were not likely to win this war. But that didn't stop the revolutionaries. Instead, it gave them strength. They fought harder. They became more resolute and more determined. And they won. If they would have given up simply because gaining independence was really difficult and the odds were stacked against them, then our country wouldn't exist. We need to be like that great generation of Americans who gave us our independence and our right to vote. We need to be resolute, determined, and courageous. There is nothing we can't do as long as we believe we can do it and if we work together. We can't let petty politics get in our way. We have to be united. Again, our generation will be the most dominant and influential generation of this century. And we have the opportunity to foment a new direction for our country and the world. So let me ask you this. Do you want to be a part of a generation that allowed the problems we face to fester and worsen? Because trying to fix them would have required a lot of sacrifice and hard work, and the odds were stacked against us? And because we were too afraid to even try to make things better, we doomed future generations. Or do you want to be a part of a generation who didn't cower at the myriad of challenges it faced and instead rose to the occasion and changed the course of our country and the world for the better? History is calling on us to be the next great generation. The phone has been ringing and ringing and ringing. It's time for us to answer the call, put on our big boy pants, and get to work. This is our destiny, if we choose to make it so. Are we going to vote in every election to make sure our voice is heard? Are we going to be informed citizens and active participants in our democracy? Are we going to hold our elected officials accountable while they are in office representing us and our needs, not the needs of billionaires, lobbyists, and special interests? Are we going to push for common sense, long-term solutions to the many problems that threaten our nation and make sure that those solutions are based on facts and that they serve the greater good? If we do all of these things, we will change the direction of our nation and the world, and we will build an amazing legacy that we will proudly pass on to our children and grandchildren. With as bad as things are right now, and it just seems like they get worse every day, it's so easy to become disillusioned and cynical. I understand why you're frustrated and disappointed, because you're all too aware that the institutions that are supposed to work for the American people are massively failing us. But don't let cynicism consume you. Cynicism only serves to hold us back. It's like a nasty disease that invades and rots our souls. Don't lose faith in our ability to be the change our country and the world needs. We need to be positive and confident. We must absolutely refuse to have low expectations about what we're capable of doing. As Michelangelo suggested, the greater danger is not that your hopes are too high and you fail to reach them. It's that they're too low and you do. My favorite quote of all time is by Thomas Paine, and he wrote, "We have it in our power to begin the world over again." Just think about that. Let it marinate in your mind for a moment. We have it in our power to begin the world over again. We, the millennial generation, have that power. And more importantly, we have that opportunity right now. As fucked up as this country is, we can make it better. I know it is overwhelming to think about all that needs to be done, to think about all the problems that need to be addressed. We have a lot of hard work ahead of us, which is why we need to get to work now. And when it comes to getting our democracy on the right track, the best thing we can do is become more politically engaged. And the best way to do that is simply by voting. It isn't just our right or a privilege we are incredibly lucky to have. It's our duty. So on November 8th, for the love of all things holy, people, make sure you and everyone you know gets to the polls and votes. I'm sure millions of you voted for someone on American Idol or The Voice. We should be way more passionate about who we vote for to represent us in political office, because those people will actually have an effect on our everyday lives. And if voting on election day would be difficult for you, and I know a lot of you are away at college, then take advantage of early voting if your state has it, or vote by absentee ballot. Just make sure your vote is counted. And do things like have an election day party and post pictures of yourself on social media wearing your I voted sticker. Just go ahead and brag about what a responsible and caring citizen you are. Get excited about this election. And most especially, start getting excited about the awesome opportunity we millennials have to become the next great generation. Now, if you would disagree with me and you think that your vote doesn't matter and that there is nothing the American people can do to change this country, then I challenge you to prove me wrong by voting and by being more politically engaged. If you don't do these things, then you can't prove me wrong. But I guarantee you that if millennials do vote in high numbers, and if we keep voting and remain informed citizens who are very politically and civically engaged, then things will start to change. And remember, change will happen gradually. So if it doesn't happen right after the upcoming election, that doesn't mean you're right. We have to continue to vote and to stay politically and civically involved for the rest of our lives. That's how democracy works, kids. It's a lifelong commitment. And real quickly, just A little message to all the older people who think we millennials are just a bunch of coddled kids who expect a trophy every time we do something that we're supposed to do. And we will never be a great generation because we will never be able to handle the real world. Yada, 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 get off my lawn, whatever. Guess what? We will rise to the occasion and we will change the world for the better. And when we do, we are going to reward ourselves with the biggest damn trophy the world has ever seen. And here's an idea. Instead of constantly tearing us down, why don't you for once acknowledge that it is your generation's fault that our country is as bad off as it is? Millennials certainly aren't responsible for this mess. That's on you. We're inheriting this giant mess from you. So instead of telling us how horrible we are and claiming that we are all that is wrong with this country, why not try working with us to right this ship? And if you can stop arguing amongst yourselves and actually do help us instead of continuing to make things harder for us, then maybe you'll get a trophy too. You know, one of those little participation trophies that your generation gave us when we were kids, but is now criticizing us for having received. All right, to wrap things up, I hope what I've said has inspired you. I hope that you now understand how important voting is and how important it is to keep yourself informed and to take your civic duty seriously. And I hope that you are looking forward to working together to take our country and the world to a new era of peace and prosperity. Remember, being a great generation may be our destiny, but only if we choose it. We will decide what the future holds by our actions and inactions in the years to come. And that will ultimately shape our generation's legacy. And I can guarantee you this. If we continue to be apathetic and ignorant of the important issues, and we don't vote and continue to believe that nothing we do will matter, then the future will be very bleak indeed, because we've already decided that it is. But if we choose to take advantage of this incredible opportunity to institute positive change, then there are no limits to what we can accomplish, as long as we work together. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, a Japanese general reportedly said, "I'm afraid we just awoke a sleeping giant." I believe that the millennial generation is a sleeping giant. And my hope is that this video goes viral and wakes us the fuck up. We need to rise to the occasion and become the powerful and enlightened generation we are destined to be. Thank you so much for watching. And if you liked this video, again, please share it. Share it with as many of your family and friends as you can. And please, please, please vote on November 8th. If we can increase our generation's voter turnout, we could have a significant effect on this election. But we'll never know how much of an impact we could have if we don't vote in higher numbers. So please vote. Please, please vote, guys. Please. If you don't vote, I'm going to cry. And you don't want to make me cry. I'm a nice lady. Don't make me cry. Get registered and get out and vote. Let's take our power back. This is our time. This is our destiny. Let's stop making excuses. Let's get to work and let's change this country and this world. Okay? You with me? I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Time for me to step down off my soapbox. Peace out. Love ya.